I'm Clint Carney from System Sin, and today we're going to take a clay sculpture and turn it into a resin display bust. Stick around. This video is going to cover how I mold, cast, paint, and finish the sculpture. If you'd like to see my process for designing and sculpting this lovely lady, then check out my previous video. By the time we're done today, we're going to have a nice display piece that I hope will be a fun and somewhat gross addition to my collection. And of course, you can make one of these for yourself too if you follow along. And anyone is 100% welcome to use the design of this character if you like, so long as you show me how it turns out, because I'd love to see your work too. Or you can follow these same steps and create a character of your very own. But no matter how it turns out, you're going to have lots of fun making it, and really that's what it's all about anyway. So let's get started.
I'm going to be making a brush-on silicone mold. So the first thing I'm doing is adding a little wall of clay around the perimeter of the sculpture to catch all the silicone as it drips down. I'm going to be doing 2 coats of the silicone. The first coat I'm just leaving as is, so it's very liquidy and can seep into all the cracks and crevices. And then in the second coat of silicone, I'm going to be adding a thickening agent. The type of silicone I'm using is called Rebound 25. It's great for this kind of brush-on mold. And I'll be leaving links to that and all the other materials in the description below if you'd like to pick any up. The next stage is I'm going to make a hard shell around the sculpture. I'm using something called Freeform Air. It's very lightweight and does a great job with this sort of thing. If I were making this for like a big production where other people were going to be using the mold, I would do something a little bulkier and a little more sturdy, but since this is just for my own personal project, I'm going for something with a very light footprint, something that's not going to take up a lot of space when I'm done, because ultimately I'm going to have to store this. I'm just using some gaffer's tape to put the shell back together and just pop the silicone back in, and it maintains the shape of the sculpture. I throw a little bit of baby powder in there just to prevent the resin from sticking, and now it's time to mix up the resin. So I'm using a translucent resin, which allows me to put different color dyes into the resin. So as you'll see here, I'm doing 3 different coats of this resin, progressively getting darker. So I start with a lighter green and go to a darker green, and then the last coat is this dried blood brown kind of color. And since the resin is semi-translucent, when you see it from the other side, you get to see a little more variation in the color, and it just gives you that really cool look. It only takes about 10 minutes for each of these layers to dry, so this process actually goes pretty quick. So I put the styrofoam head in here, and then I'm just going to fill the mold with an expandable foam. I'm just eyeballing it here because I'm pretty used to, to what quantities to use, but this might be a little bit of trial and error for you depending on your setup. This does expand quite a lot, so you don't want to put too much foam in there. And now we pull it all out of the mold and see how it turned out. You want to make sure when you're pulling the silicone off, just be aware of the angles in the sculpture so that you don't tear your silicone. And yeah, this turned out pretty good. Next step, we just want to do a little cleanup. There wasn't a whole lot on the mold that needed to be cleaned up, honestly, but this border is the big thing here, so all the excess plastic, and I'm just using a utility knife to cut that off. Of course, please be careful if you're going to use a sharp blade. Try to cut away from yourself as much as possible. Don't wound yourself. That would be bad. And then the next thing I'm doing is I'm just taking some acrylic paint and I'm covering the styrofoam and any of the expanding foam in black paint. Again, the back of this is going to be covered by a wig, so I'm not really concerned with it looking cool, but if anything does show through, it's better that it be black than to have the bright white of the styrofoam showing through. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some white acrylic paint and just paint in the eyeballs and the teeth. This won't be the final color that's on there. I'm actually going to be using oil paint for the rest of the paint on this, but I just wanted to get the darker green there covered up with some white just so that my other colors can shine through on there and look nicer than they would if I had just painted them directly on top of the green. With the oil paint that I'll be using, most of it I'm going to thin down very heavily in odorless turpenoid, so it's just going to go on there like a wash, because we already have the main color of the sculpture already there in the resin, but I want to darken it up and give it more of like a classic Halloween, vintage Halloween witch look. So We start light and we're going to darken it up with some washes. And what I'm doing here is I'm just taking some off-white nail polish and going over the eyeballs and teeth, and it gives that a really nice shiny look. Now I'm starting the oil paint. This is transparent oxide red from Michael Harding Paints. And again, I'm just thinning it out quite a bit with odorless terpenoid. And when you paint this then with the oil paints, basically it's just a wash. So all of the darker color is getting into the cracks and really bringing out the detail in the sculpture. And you can see just by using this particular color, I'm taking kind of that turquoise-ish green of the resin, and I'm really darkening it up and making it just have this kind of earthier green tone to it, which is what I'm going for with this particular sculpt. I know that there's going to be a lot of red in the paint job in terms of just the torn parts of the face. There'll be the blood, and then the tongue is going to be red and that sort of thing. And so I wanted to create a really cool contrast with the green of her skin and the red of all the highlighted parts. The cool thing about using the translucent resin is that you can dye it any color you want. So if you wanted to do a witch sculpt like this, you don't have to do it that dark. You could do it, super light green or, blue even, or whatever you wanted. You can really just do whatever you want with it. And having that color set up in the resin really just gives you a great head start on your actual paint job. Okay, that's pretty much it in terms of it being covered in the translucent oxide red. And now I'm just taking alizarin crimson and I'm adding some highlights, along the eyes and just kind of hitting just some different areas just to add a little more details into the flesh tone. And now I'm bringing that alizarin crimson into the mouth, into the gums, the lips. And I'm starting thin here, just to give the appearance of blood under the surface of the skin. But then once I get into the tongue, I'll go back over and darken it up. On the tongue, I also added I also mixed in some white with the crimson to pinken it up a bit, just to make that a more realistic color. We didn't want it to be totally blood red. And now this is just straight up crimson here on the wounds and the flesh that's peeling off, and then the holes in her skin. And it is looking pretty cool. Starting to shape up, just adding a little bit more crimson here just to accent some of the folds in the skin a little more, and the ears. And it's getting pretty close. The next thing I'm doing here is painting the worms. And I wanted to kind of limit the color palette. I didn't want to go too crazy with it. So I'm actually taking more of that transparent oxide red and I just mixed it with some titanium white. But for the titanium white, instead of using just regular straight up oil paint, I use something called an alkyd oil paint, which is faster drying because I'm impatient and I didn't want to wait too long for that to dry in the middle of this paint job. But once it did dry, then I went over with more of the thinned out transparent oxide red and just washed that in to the details. And that's pretty much it for those worms. They're pretty much good to go. Now I just took a little bit of light blue here and traced over the veins just to make those pop a little bit more. And the paint job at this point is pretty much done. Just going over a few little highlights there, but that's about it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some 5-minute epoxy. And it's just 2 parts mixed evenly together, and it dries in 5 minutes. And this stuff is fantastic for giving you nice glossy parts. So, of course, you go over the eyeballs, go over the worms. I'm going over all the parts of the mouth, the teeth, and that just makes everything shiny and wet looking, which just makes it all the more disgusting. But the cool thing about this 5-minute epoxy is you can also mix it with some oil paint and add some different kinds of accents in here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be mixing some of this 5-minute epoxy up with my crimson oil paint, and that's going to give me this pretty awesome blood, which is then going to harden, and it will permanently look like wet dripping blood, but it will be completely hard and dry. And you'll see as I add this, since it takes 5 minutes to set up, you can still get some really cool organic looking drips out of it. And then if you time it just right, play your cards right, you'll get like one of those drips will just harden and you'll have that frozen in time, and it'll just look pretty cool. And I think I was fortunate enough on this sculpture, on this particular go around, to get a couple drips just kind of frozen as it goes down, and it came out really, really gnarly. Super happy with how that turned out. And the last stage here is just adding a wig. I had this wig lying around already, but you can get these on Amazon for pretty cheap. You could, put whatever type of wig you want, whatever color, or if you don't want to give it hair, you could go with a hood to cover up the back of the styrofoam. And here she is. Here's the finished Worm Witch. What do you think, guys? I am pretty happy with how she turned out. She's going to make a great addition to my collection. Anyway, please let me know what you think in the comments below, because that's what matters most. Not what I think about my own work, but what you think. And if you end up using any of these techniques to make your own display bust, please let me know. I would love to see your work as well. Anyway, please like the video, leave a comment, and if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that would mean a lot to me. I love having new subscribers. I'm still running a contest where when we get to 10,000 subscribers, I'm going to be giving away the pumpkin that I made in a previous video. A few videos back, go check that out if you want to win that pumpkin. You can do so by watching that video and learn all about how to do that. And I guess that's about it. So thank you all for watching. I got a lot of new videos coming out, prop related, mask related. Also, I'm going to get into some digital artwork videos and some painting videos, all kinds of stuff. So stick around, and I will see you in the next video.